Welcome to the MDC Talks. This is your boy Omari Motion Carter, and we are the Motion Dance Collective, specializing in the presentation, education, and creation of dance on film practice. Welcome to part 2 of a podcast with Marlene Millar. Let's get to it.
So I guess we should dive right into, we wanted to talk about navigation. James just watched it for the first time, and he has plenty that I'm sure he would like to ask you, but navigation is number...
It's number 6. It's the 7th. Yeah, it's actually the 7th film that Sandy and I have done together since we started in 2014. But there was one that we just weren't so happy with that we decided to pull out of the series.
Oh, I didn't know that. You're allowed. I mean, you're allowed to do that.
When we showed Traverse in Saint-Étienne, we had a really beautiful cinema to screen it in, and we decided to play all the films, to share with the audience, to create a longer evening, and it gave us a chance to sit with an audience and watch each of the films that we had made. And when it got to the one called Migration, which did have its own little life out there on the circuit, we just looked at each other after and were like, no.
That's so interesting to make that call at that stage as well, because obviously, as you said, it's sort of been on the circuit for a while. And then to have that realization and decide, you know what, actually, that's amazing. I don't know if everyone would be brave enough to make that call. You know what I mean? But, so with navigation, Omari just was sort of mentioning he was your assistant director, and I know that he absolutely loved the experience and learned a lot from working with you.
Oh, yeah.
And go on. What do you want to... Let's just dive in.
Oh, goodness.
Can I start with black and white?
Yeah, good one.
Why black and white? Where did that decision come from?
Well, we spent a lot of time in Ireland developing the film. And as beautiful as the green of Ireland is, it took over, we just felt it suddenly became about the land in a different way. And for us, we felt it took away from the story we were trying to tell, and there's a degree of somberness or sadness or struggle that we just felt it was a little too cheerful with the green in a way. And our first film, Lay Me Low, we had chosen, for similar reasons, to do in black and white. It was a more somber piece. And we just sort of all, myself, Sandy, and Kaz Tagney, our DOP, all felt that black and white was the right look for the film.
Yeah, it's really interesting because for me, it was all about the rock structure. The black and white just made the entire landscape look like a rock structure. And obviously the rocks were the platform that constructed a lot of the dance sequences, but the entire landscape became rock when you see it in black and white. But I can imagine, obviously I haven't seen what that landscape looks like in colour, but I can imagine with a lot of greenery how different that comes across. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear why, and I hadn't really thought about it because it doesn't, I hadn't even registered the amount of grass, because to me it just came across as this geographical rock structure. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear that decision process.
We did work with these massive limestone pavements that they're known as, and the cliffs, again, all rock, and the walls, the stone walls. But then there were expanses of green, and then the sky sometimes was blue, sometimes was cloudy. That was also another consideration, knowing that we'd be working with shifting weather and lighting, and it seems to be less distracting when we're in black and white. And I love the textures, like the texture of the limestone, the texture of the road that Dominic is running on at the beginning, and I felt and the textures of the skin and their clothes, everything I just felt was more present in the black and white than it was in color.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we did toy with the idea for quite a while of kind of desaturated color or very saturated color or black and white. and then it just became no question, we're doing it in black and white.
Yeah. Was that call made in pre-production then?
Yes.
Had you played with that in pre-production?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the choice of costumes, the color of the costumes, we spent a lot of time doing tests in Montreal with everybody wearing, because we wanted different tones of gray. So we were avoiding black altogether and white altogether, so that when we did our color grading, we'd be able to pull the black out of the shots and work with the highlights without overexposing anybody's costume. So that was really interesting to see, being on set. Omari, you saw how colorful everybody was. Like David was wearing lime green, and Apia had this bright red raincoat on, and there were so many colors. So we done tests with everybody's costume beforehand, and then what we didn't have control over, but we'd sent a lot of suggestions along to was the choir. What colors to avoid. Of course, we didn't want people going out and buying things, so it was like whatever they had within their wardrobes that fit within the no black, no white. Even though a bunch of people showed up with white leggings, I don't know where that came from, but but at that point we just had to deal with. We weren't going to start like spray painting people's leggings or anything. But so they showed up in a lot of red. Actually, there's a lot of red on that limestone pavement and on the beach.
Because it was a really large cast and crew. No, I mean you had the dancers that. You also had the choir, and then I don't know how big the crew was, but I imagine it was
like 11, 12. I'm trying to remember all the numbers down the side of the call sheet.
It was one of the biggest shoots that you've ever worked on, no?
10 cast.
But it's the biggest project in terms of the number of people involved.
It was especially with cast and crew, definitely. And even just think of, like, I don't know if anyone... If you've spoken about this on any of your interviews, but the treks we had to do with the gear, oh my god! If there was a behind the scenes, some people were absolute troopers, and even the fact that the dancers would come off of doing a whole day shoot and then have to carry, well, not have to, they helped
volunteer to
carry all of the stuff back over. Sometimes these limestone paths would have like 4 to 5 inch feet drops in between them, so it was just like that part of it. And then coming home at the end and watching the footage, especially like when we came home and watched that drone shot when we couldn't get anything else that day. So I think we got the drone shot, and then it rained for the rest of the day.
Okay.
And so we were like, okay, let's just wait it out. And we were using all sorts of apps to try and position how much break we were going to get between pieces of rain. And then when we got home, everyone's feeling so disheartened
because they had to cut the shoot short.
Right, but then when we watched that shot, I think it's the final shot of the film. When we ended up watching that shot after that day, and just knowing all the work we had put in the week before of actually, everyone made this film together in every sort of way. It was fantastic. There was no other feeling like it. I've never watched a single shot and felt those emotions with so many people. It was really lovely. It was really, really nice. I think we needed it that day. Yeah. We needed to see that shot.
It was a very challenging shoot. Like you're saying, accessing the locations, even if it looked like a simple walk. Again, the grass was always so deceptive. There's a lot of long grass. But as soon as you step in it, there's big blocks of limestone underneath it. So you're constantly risking, twisting your ankle. The equipment was heavy. I did question during the production, did we need this equipment? Did we have to? Could we not have shot it on an iPhone? But the choices we made, and even having the large crew, was we knew that we probably... we couldn't afford to be there for more than 6 days, and we knew that within those 6 days it would probably be reduced down to less than 6 full shooting days because of the weather. So we're like, okay, let's always have 2 cameras plus the drone on the drone days, top-notch assistance, just so that when we get something, we know we've got it the best it can be. Like, we had the most amazing first assistant camera person, Fiona. And she was brilliant with racking focus, because we did so much Steadicam work, and with 10 dancers and up to 40 choir members, there was a lot of focusing to be doing, selective focusing, and she was like right on it.
She was doing some insane stuff. Like her monitor was cutting out, and she was taking focus from like 12 feet away with no monitor, and she's just guessing, but she would get it half the time. Yeah. But then like it's just awesome. It's such a talent that you don't really appreciate, and a lot of people don't know about that role as well, especially when starting out or thinking about film. It's just, she's awesome. She was awesome. Hey Fiona, if you're listening.
Yeah, and it goes back to the craft and the experience, you know, that role is so essential. And I think back to like beautiful documentaries that were shot on film that, you know, again, were often very spontaneous, and the filmmaker or the camera person didn't know what the action was going to be, and they'd be there with their assistant camera person pulling focus for them that didn't have, you know, a playback. But it's that experience of understanding, okay, 12 feet, this is going to hit the mark. You know, and just being able to judge and gauge and have all that information to rely on that's just built in. Yeah. So when the monitor goes out, she's still on it, you know? Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. So I did question those very weighty tripods, those very heavy cameras, the big everything that we had with us. It was like big and heavy, but
heavy.
It needed to be too because we had the wind, you know, so things had to be solid. And we needed the heavy tripod so the cameras wouldn't be shaking. We needed the big matte boxes for the filters and the tents. Oh my gosh, the support we had, the support crew was just incredible. They'd be out there at 5 a.m. in the dark in the pouring rain setting up tents for us on the chance that it was going to stop raining and we'd be able to shoot when the light appeared.
Yeah, and I also want to give a quick shout out to Manny because he really helped. He took me in his arms, and because I told him at the beginning, we went on a drive, and I said, dude, you know, I'm a bit nervous, but I think I've got everything. I know what I need to. I know what's happening. I know what we need to do. And he would just ask me questions all the time. Even before we got to Ireland, he would call me and have small conversations with just me and make sure I was okay if I needed anything. Give me templates and things that I needed to fill out and stuff like that. So Manny pretty much raised me in my first assistant directing role. But I think it was he was awesome. He was so integral to asking those difficult questions as well. You know, where the snacks are gonna go. You'd be like, well, I'm not even thinking about the snacks right now. But Manny knew, like, you know, he would think about all of those things. And I think he made such a great production manager in that respect.
Yes, and he found the crew before we got there, and that was his thing. It's like, you have to have the best. You just have to have people who know what they're doing. You know, we can't risk delays. You know, yes, it's going to cost more, but it's going to, you know, how are we going to get the material that you need? Because we just have this little window to work within. And he was brilliant to bring all that together and working with our unit production managers on location, and you know, so many things. Just when they were doing the returns made me realize so many, like there's no film production facility on the west coast of Ireland, right? So we had to go to Dublin, which was a 2-hour drive away to get stuff. And then locally we were sourcing things. You know, we needed markers to put on the limestone to predetermine where all the choir members were going to be, to practice the choreography and whatnot, but what was not going to blow away. And I know they found some type of little weighted rings at a secondary school somewhere that they use on the field for some practice they do. So they were returning all these things. We couldn't rent toilets to have outside, so we had little tents. Anyways, there were so many things to figure out.
Because of that specific location. Yeah.
And we didn't have Wi-Fi in the main house that we were staying in.
Oh my god!
Oh no!
We've had to buy a dongle. All of those things came into play, but it does teach you though, because you know, screen dance and dance film is a site-specific practice, more so than, you know, our stages and our studios that we're used to dancing as dance makers anyway. So it's so important to think about site. Just the whole idea. You and Sandy and Kez went to the location a year before, you know, to really get ingrained into that location before we even got there. And even just thinking about, you know, Mulochmore, for example, how important it was for us to get that shot. And it was one shot that you know, I was in a position to have to suggest maybe we can't do this one. But when Sandy justified and yourself justified why it was so important, we all found a way to make it work, because it was more than just whether the day or whether it rains or not. We need to just try and get this thing. Because there's so much that comes with it, other than just the performance being placed in it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I learned a lot in that moment as well.
Our first research trip to the Burn, the area in which we were filming, we did it intentionally in September so that we'd be able to, judge the light and even though things change all the time in Ireland, but the length of day, the qualities that are inherent to that time of year, knowing that, or hoping that we'd be back filming the following September.
So did you have a grant or something for this one in particular, or is it just the time building up?
Yeah, we took it step by step. So when we were first in Ireland at Light Moves, when we first came up with the idea of potentially exploring this project, we first applied for a research grant. And we're like, okay, well, if we get that, we'll use it and we'll do the research. Evaluate, because we knew it was going to be huge. Just the demands of it, and of course the financing of it. So
was that research grant given by Light Moves, or was it?
No. It was given by the Canada Council for the Arts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was a few months after we had the little seed of the idea, and it sort of stayed with us, and we were in touch with the choir and Hannah, who's a photographer who's doing a lot of location scouting for us. So we just kind of couldn't put that idea aside. So we're like, okay, let's start with research. If we get some support for research, we know we're onto something. If somebody else sees value in our ideas. So we got that. So it was our first trip to Ireland. Then we applied for development or pre-production. And again, it's like, we'll see. We always had a global budget in mind, though. What's the minimum that we need to get all of our dancers there, to hire a crew, to have equipment, anticipating everything, all the housing, the food, enormous expenses just in that itself. So, not being naive, like really, what do we need? What's the minimum we need? And it's a lot.
Yeah.
So then we went to the next stage, but still presenting what the global budget would be. And each step of the way, we're always keeping, we kept some of the funding from research, because Sandy and I both had to travel to Europe. So we were able to tie in other work that we were doing with a quick trip or, a flight to Ireland. She was actually performing in Ireland the summer before we shot, so while she was there, she worked it into her contract that she'd have a few days off to be able to go and rehearse with the choir in the August prior production, which was really essential. So, we were just being really, really strategic with any money that we did get, and always moving a bit forward to the next step. So by the time we applied for production, we got support from both the Quebec Arts Council and the Canadian Council for the Arts, and that allowed us to move forward. Luckily we just received a small post-production grant, because
congratulations.
We really got to the point where like, okay, we've invested whatever fees we were going to get into this. This is getting, how are we going to finish the year? How are we going to pay to get our books done? So we kind of really pushed it further than I would often risk doing. But we did. We were successful on our second round of applying. The first one was rejected, but we resubmitted and got some funds to wrap it up and put a little bit towards distribution.
Amazing.
Yeah. So those were the two funding bodies that supported the project. And then Anna Alexandre, who was our co-producer on Traverse in France, she had gotten a really nice deal with Panavision in France when we shot Traverse, because it was just my dream to shoot with the Alexa Mini. It was like this quality I really wanted for that location, and this look, and I was really determined and just really married to that. So with her relationship that she had established with Panavision in France, she was able to connect with Panavision in Ireland. So, I mean, we still had to pay to rent the equipment, but she was able to get us a nice reduction on that. And then where else did we go? I think it was primarily us investing from, some funds we had left over from previous productions and the arts councils.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah, and then the dancers are amazing in what they contribute and what they bring, their commitment to the project. So that was essential too for us to be able to have all 10 of them travel and rehearse all summer and all of that. So they invested a lot in their time in the project that we totally appreciate.
Amazing. Okay, so the advice is take it step by step.
Step by step, but always seeing like the global,
the bigger picture,
and then how are you going to get there, and just keep reevaluating along the way. I mean, there's so many projects we've had to put on the shelf. I've done research and development into a lot of things, but it just maybe the timing wasn't right, or the interest wasn't there, or you're always up against 100 other amazing projects. So, maybe it'll come back down off the shelf in a couple of years. Even Bhairava, we had no luck getting that funded initially. And then, I don't know, it was maybe 3 years after we'd first shopped it around that we decided to put it out in the world again to try and get support. And then we did,
That's amazing. And now look at the result. That's incredible. I guess it's you mentioned earlier the concept, of rejection in this work. And well, because it's a harsh reality of the world that we're living in as artists, and for us applying for funding or trying to self-fund our projects is sort of where we're at right now. And we're a 3-person team, and we have big dreams, but it's very much the beginnings of something, and it's not something that people are comfortable talking about very often. Like, how do I take the next step from where I am right now?
And it's hard to kind of know how to do that when you're working within hybridity. Yeah. Because you go, all right, do I go to the dance funding bodies, or do I look at the film funding bodies?
Because it's almost like you don't fit into a particular, like we talked about earlier, you don't fit into a particular category, so no one really necessarily knows, or they want to invest in you because they're not quite sure of what the result will be. And as you said, the competition is just insane. So
no, that's that thing. Like, we know we're in this screen dance world, but a lot of other people don't recognize it, right? Funding bodies especially. No, I've spent years advocating and arguing and discussing what screen dance or dance film is with funding bodies here in Canada. And now I notice when, you go on, the first thing you do on your application is pick your discipline. So it's cinema and video or media arts. And then it's still documentary, experimental, or fiction. But now they've added other. And then you click other, and this little window drops down, and you fill in what you think you are.
That's all.
So it's taken, like I'm saying, 15 years or something, but we finally got the other button.
At the very least, right? Yeah.
Because we have a project in the works that we've been working on probably for a little over a year now, and it's sort of a dream for us. It's definitely a dance documentary, but it's something that's how we've had to continuously put on the back burner because of funding and because we see it as quite a big project.
We have a little chalkboard here at home of our ideas, and then we don't wipe it off the chalkboard until it's finished. So there's some that's just been on that chalkboard.
They've been there for a while.
And we wipe in between the gaps and add a new piece that we're working on. That will probably be finished before that one.
Yeah.
Well, it's when it's interesting to look beyond. Again, where do you go for funding outside of the arts councils? And there are film funds, and if you're working in documentary, look at all the documentary film funds there are. There are a lot. If you go to IDFA in Amsterdam, there's often a list of funds that they support. Hot Docs in Canada. And again, what's the subject of the film? And you might be able to find an organization that would be supportive of creating something. We didn't talk about crowdsourcing, but we've done that too for all of our projects. Though I find you tend to, you can only ask people to support your projects so many times. So I don't know where the sustainability is in that. Some people work with Patreon. That's not readily available here in Canada, so I'm not quite sure how successful artists are in putting together financing through Patreon. I think it's more for sustaining a practice. And then, again, here in Canada, there are a number of media arts and artist-run centers that often provide support for a project, if not in dollars, in equipment, editing time, access to facilities, which again really can help flesh out your budget when you're looking for something bigger. So it's just go everywhere, really. Yeah. And if you ever want to talk about any of your projects specifically, I'd be happy to brainstorm a little bit on that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's a huge challenge, like you said, and it's great it's really refreshing to hear that, even you've had projects that you put on the back burner for a few years, but then maybe at a different time they were successful and then they came to fruition, So it's exciting to hear that.
Mm-hmm. And it almost makes us, you're not starting from scratch when you're reviving something that didn't make it a few years back. You might look at it with fresh eyes, rewrite it, but the fact that it's still with you, say 3-4 years later, there's something there.
Absolutely.
James, I'd love to hear your thoughts on navigation, having just seen it yourself.
We can do that. I can chat all about that. It's really nice to see Screendance done on such a detailed level. I'm not. A lot of the Screendance that I see is done as a side project to something else, or as an evolution of something else. It's not very often that I'm not exposed to the same quantity that Omari and Anna are. So it's really nice to see something that was designed from the ground up to be a film in the dance genre as a silent film, conceptualized right from the ground up. And it's really nice to see it come across so well in the way that it's put together and the organization and, like I say, the conceptualization and also the cinematography, with that being the mindset that I approach things with now. But the thing that, other than the black and white, which I was really curious about, and it's really beautiful to see the evolution of that decision, the use of drone was really interesting. Drone is one of those things that's kind of come about in the last few years, that everyone now has sort of access to throw in these drone shots, and I feel like so often drone is used because it can be used, but the implementation in this was a necessity. It was there because it needed to be there, and it added to the story, and it added to the perspective of what you were telling, and that to me was just so nice. When I saw some of the drone footage that was in there and it wasn't throwaway footage, that just made me so happy. I mean, I'm sure there were. I've heard that there were a load of challenges with the drone, but I don't know. Maybe you can just talk about the thought process of bringing that in, and why that for you was such an important choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the whole series is about this ongoing journey. So it's about traveling. It's about going through these different landscapes. So the drone is just a perfect partner to be in there, and to reveal the landscape that they're traveling through. We first used a drone in the Migration Dance Film Project with Pilgrimage. And again, I wanted to use it only where it was going to be, like, it had to be a drone, not because we had a drone. Because it's great to have a drone and explore things and find other ways, other perspectives on your dance practice, other ways of seeing things. But for me, it has to. I think you summed it up beautifully, how you described the way that you saw it in navigation. So we first used it in Pilgrimage, and what I was really excited about in Pilgrimage was how we used it, not just as a top shot, but we used it as a traveling. We had it right in front of the dancers, and they're, rushing, and the drone is just pulling back with them, and there's just like this incredible dynamic action that was happening. I love that. So I'm always looking to use drone in a way that, is how it can only be seen
That way.
through the drone, through that vision. And we worked with a really experienced pilot and drone operator in Ireland, and that was essential too, because again, the biggest challenge we had was weather. It was raining too hard, we couldn't fly the drone. So he had to really, understand what the intention of the shot was, where it was going to come in when they're running down that road through the valley, and what do we want to see. Likewise on the cliff, to pull back and just feel the power of the ocean, and how they just become these specks on this cliff. So we spent a lot of time consulting with and talking to Kev, who was our drone operator, and really designing those shots, which was great. And
the pacing was something that I mentioned to Anna and Omari when we just jumped on this call earlier. Like you say, just the operator having such a good understanding of what those shots were for you. The pacing was so well executed, and that only comes with having, a really good communication with the operator, and also having an operator who can really feel the shot. It really came across.
That's great. Thank you for noticing that or seeing it that way. When we did Traverse in France, we were also dependent on drones, because we just couldn't get the camera up high enough, because that was another location, Omari, you missed that one. We also had to trek all the equipment in at least a kilometer on little pathways and over small bridges, or carry it up like 10 flights of stairs. And we had heavy equipment there too. But the drone operator we worked with in France is also a dancer and choreographer, who does a lot of his own work in locations that are dependent on having a drone. So the great thing about working with him was he was also able to quickly understand what the choreographic phrase was. So, when I was communicating with him on location, and, I'd already sort of predetermined what type of shot I wanted, but when it was going to pan down the rocks of the dam and reveal the women below as they were going into a turn. So he was able, he got the phrasing right away, so he was able to time his drone to reveal them when they were in this moment in the choreography, and that was beautiful too. To work with somebody who understood dance and filmmaking and was the drone operator.
Definitely makes a huge difference.
This is really interesting, because this is something that I've had conversations with quite a few people about. I know that I've had conversations about this with Anna and Omari.
This is our main one.
But operators who understand dance, is that something that you seek out, or are they people that you kind of bump into because of, dance film festivals, and obviously people who are interested in dance appear at dance film festivals, or do you specifically look for people when you're putting crew together and putting a team together who have done dance film before and things like that, because you find that they have a sensibility towards the pacing and the dynamicism and the framing and the predicting of movement? Is that something that you seek out for those reasons, or not? Is it just happened that you've kind of fell into these collaborations?
Well, sort of going back to those collaborative relationships I developed when I was a film student, there were two cinematographers I still work with now that I've worked with since then, who definitely have an understanding of the language of dance, and that is often how I approach it. Myself, dance is the language, it's equivalent to the script, so you have to understand all the components of that language, the phrasing, the moments where things are going to happen, what's important, what the intention is, what the action is, to be able to understand well enough to film it, because we're making these shot lists and storyboards, but unless we're counting beats, somebody has to be able to read the movement and understand it. And that has been a problem sometimes, working with amazing cinematographers who know everything about composition and quality and lighting and can bring a lot to it, But when you're on location and you need to pick up a shot at a certain point and you're describing, well, they're going to do this and then they're going to like turn around and I'm going to tell you when, that becomes really complicated. So when you have somebody, and that's a thing that we try and do a lot in pre-production, is really break down the choreography and put words to it so that the dancers will know, okay, whatever the phrase, like the words might be that we've associated with that block, or if it's a very rhythmic thing, we can do it with counts and timing, but so that the crew will also know where we are. Yeah. So that some people naturally can, even if they don't have a dance background, they can visually understand and recall and remember what the movement sequences are, and other people it's just, you have to rely on other indications, other directives to follow the action. But I've totally overshot 35 takes of something just because I was having trouble communicating what the action was and the fact that we'd already gotten it from another angle, because it just looked different from a different angle.
Is that the same thought process then as you have with editors? Do you find the same thing when you're working with specific editors, the issue of sort of pacing for dance and the understanding of how sequences get put together relating to the movement of the body?
I think it's less like a good editor. An editor that understands musicality, I think, is really important with a lot of the dance projects that I've done. And it's what you provide them with as well, right? So I still think it's a lot of my responsibility as a director to have the footage for them to see what works well together. And then it's really that craft of editing. And Jules Denis Berville, who's worked with us, except for the first two that I cut, he's been the editor on the whole migration dance sequence. He was second camera operator on the last one. So he's part of the team. So he understands what the intention is. He's there. I mean, he was amazing on Traverse. He was a second camera on that too. He was reminding me of things because he really helped to build the shot list, and he was just like a great, don't forget about this, and have you thought about this angle over here? Because again, it was so challenging, the environment and the time frame that we were working in. So he was just amazing at coming up with on-the-spot reminders and ideas. And then he was going to be editing it. So he was looking at it as we were shooting as a shoot-to-edit exercise as well, which I always try to do, bringing my background as an editor to the production. Always thinking, what can this cut with? How's it going to...
Yeah, that's such a useful tool to have an editor's eyes on the shoot, and it's something I'm hearing about more and more often now, that an editor will be brought on almost just as a consultant for the shoot on bigger productions. So it's really interesting to hear that that's almost becoming a norm now in some areas of production. I've seen it on a couple of commercials that I've shot where the editor's been present. So yeah, it's interesting. It's so great that you were able to have that experience and have him there shooting with you as well. That's definitely an advantage.
The Migration Dance Film Project, I guess I wanted to ask, because I've never actually asked you this before, what started it?
It was me meeting Sandy and finding out that she had just started working not as a soloist, which is what she had been doing beforehand, but she started working with a group. And I think she kind of already knew that it was going to be, really great material for film, but she hadn't quite made that decision clearly yet. So she'd been working with a group of artists who were all working with her in more of a workshop manner, some were vocalists, some were dancers, but they were all people that were interested in exploring percussive dance. So my understanding was they sort of started workshopping and getting together informally and then regularly, and then her mom had passed away and her stepfather shortly after, and she created this piece called Lay Me Low, which is very much a mourning song, and it taps into her roots, her family coming from Kentucky and being close to the Shaker community, which the song comes from originally. So she had, done this work with the group, and I'm not sure. I mean, they really hadn't, as I understand, made any decision on how to show it or where to show it. So they were just sort of crisscrossing and doing all these patterns in the studio when I went to see it. But I loved it. Like, it just touched my heart in a way that I was like, I have to do something with this. This is going to be such a beautiful film. So that was the impetus for us making that first film, and then carrying on with this idea of journey and why do people go from one place to another, and why do you have to leave, and just exploring reasons and stories that we were collecting along the way of the idea of human migration and how that can be interpreted through dance. So it was really Lay Me Low that was our starting point. Yeah. And it's still one of my favorites when we talk about what's your,
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Yeah, so this series is one of the projects that's touched you the most.
Yeah, definitely, and still Lay Me Low. It was such a beautiful. I just remember being so affected by the work, really wanting to work with it. And it just presented so many new challenges for me as well. I'd never worked with such a large cast before. Except I think when I was a student, I did, this kind of Bugsby Berkeley piece for a fiction film with, 20 tap dancers. But aside from that, I hadn't done anything, with such a large ensemble of dancers. And then body percussion was completely new to me. So I loving the fact that they were making their own soundtrack. Because I really, really, really appreciate the use of sound in film and sound in screen dance. So this was just, such a beautiful collection of new things to work with. Yeah.
Amazing. Omari was just saying before we came on to speak with you that he obviously knew you and Sandy's work before meeting you, and had admired it sort of from afar, and dreamed of making his own work within that vein because he's a body percussionist and because of his dance film background.
Yeah, it was the reason. I don't know, James, if you remember me showing you pictures of Pilgrimage when we were working on Ease On Down, and I was like, I want to make something like this. It's not out yet, but when I see it, it needs to be like this. I don't know what it's even about, but it looks exactly like I want it to be.
It just spoke to him on so many levels.
And that was just the photos, there was just so much that I already knew.
Yeah.
Especially seeing Lay Me Low beforehand as well. It's just great. And the series is just great. And even thinking about pace in general, starting off with Lay Me Low and the pace of where navigation is at. It starts off with that run automatically. And I was like, this film is totally... So the pace has increased throughout the series in that sense. And we actually might be finally getting there, because these guys have been traveling from the beginning. Sunset, sunrise. And
I met with about half of the dancers the other night. They've started getting together in Sandy's back alley again, and more just to reconnect, and everybody's taking the lead in what they're going to do together. So it was Sonia, and she was doing a line dance to some really great music with these incredible groups. So they were line dancing in the back, and then we were sitting around having a little chit chat after, and they were wondering what's next,
Yeah,
so
of course.
I think now I'm going to take a little influence from your playbook and go with something joyous. They have arrived. So
we deserve to give ourselves that.
Yeah, and they were so happy. Afia was like, "Yeah, we've been traveling for a long time over some really harsh terrain. It'd be really nice to arrive somewhere and be happy." So I think we're going to start exploring, especially with the limitations of what we can do these days, living still under the COVID cloud. So I'm going to start doing solos with each of them. And right now, Sandy and I were supposed to be in Italy. We had received a residency grant, and we were supposed to be working with Corpi in Torino on the ideas of taking the Migration Dance Film Project into urban environments. So we're going to start doing that in Montreal.
Yeah.
And we're going to start working on solos with each. Because I think people also who've been following the series are really intrigued by who each of these individuals are, right? So I'm shooting one next week with Sandy. And then we're just going to do it when we can and how we can throughout the year.
See what happens.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm really excited for that because, obviously the topic of migration is often about the struggle. It's about the hardship and, the grief that comes along with that. But I think on the flip side, there is joy to be found in that too. So I'm so excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Marlene, could you let our listeners know how they can follow your work? How can they check out the trailers and things that are coming up next for you now? Let them know.
Yeah, well, definitely. I'm going to put a little bit more effort into keeping my website up to date. So there's MarleneMillar.com. And there's a link there to get to Mouvement Perpétuel, or you can just go directly to mouvementperpetuel.net to see the projects that Philip and I have been working on. And we're, over the course of the summer, we're hoping to start building some type of platform for the Migration Dance Film Project where people can see the films and follow the process of us making the subsequent short films that we'll be making. Just because we're really missing our audience, we're missing traveling. I was supposed to be at Shortwaves in Poland and in Hong Kong and in Budapest. So I'm home. So, which is wonderful. But so we're realizing we want to stay connected. And so we're putting together a proposal to build some type of interface, some type of platform specifically for the Migration Dance Film Project to keep connecting with people who've been following along with us the last 5 years.
Oh, awesome. Marlene, thank you so much for joining us. We love you. Thanks as well for for all the support you've given to us as well as makers and as just fellow colleagues and mentors, and it's just been awesome to be a screen dance maker in this time, with you also being a screen dance maker in this time. So it's lovely.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure. It really has.